So this is Curse Podcast. I'm Josh, and today I have Cam on from Old Gods of Appalachia, and uh, that's a podcast. If you didn't know, we have talked about them since their inception. I think when we started seeing the promos. So I'm excited to have you on. Finally, we're gonna have you and Steve on for my other podcast, Hex-Files. It'll probably release the same week, so it'll be an Old Gods week.
Awesome. Sounds fun.
But so tell us a little bit about yourself for those that don't know, because they don't hear your voice right on the podcast, or
Right. They don't hear my voice usually. Although I've started to play a few roles, but that's like incidental roles. I'm not our narrator. I'm Cam Collins from Old Gods of Appalachia. I'm the co-creator, and I co-write the show with my partner, Steve. Podcast partner, not partner. Steve's one of my oldest friends.
I wanted to have you on here specifically because, I mean, I would love to talk to both of you, but you're a practicing witch.
Yes.
And I was like, right? No.
And our show has so many witches, so.
Yeah, and when I first started listening to it, I was hooked immediately, and just like the way it tells like the story and kind of approaches it and builds on it, it's like it's definitely that, oh my god, I can't wait for the next episode. But after listening, it's like, do they have witches? Are they witches? Do they know witches? Because there's a lot of that interweaved into the storytelling and the characters.
Yeah, I'm pretty invested in making those aspects of the show as, true to life for various practices as they can be, given it is fictionalized, and our witches obviously have their magic works a little differently than like actual witchcraft, but
Yeah, I think you get into that when you doing anything with entertainment. There's a way to make it a little bit more dramatic and fictionalized, yet also not just making like sweeping assumptions, or because you can tell when as a witch and somebody who's practiced for the over a decade now, you can tell like when something either has done their research or has
not.
Yeah.
Right. And you just want to smack your forehead and shake your head like, oh no.
Right. Like when they say like a deity's name weird, or
oh yeah.
or they're like, oh, these, or they don't understand Wicca in a whole, and they're always like, oh, they're Wiccan. But yeah,
you're like, no, actually that's not.
Right. And then you're also from Appalachia. You can tell it's not oh, this region we're gonna throw some crazy stories in here. Like, no, you guys are attempting, I think, to bring a better understanding. I mean, I know it's like a horror fiction podcast. Yeah. However, whether it's through your social media or kind of how you approach things, like you can tell you respect and live and love the area. It's not exploitive like certain things.
Like certain things. Yeah, and it's really important to us that the show certainly depict some of the hardships of living in Appalachia, but not be just poverty porn.
Right.
People who live here are, not caricatures like you see in popular media. We're just average people. We go to Starbucks and, shop at the grocery store just like everyone else, really. So, and of course, a lot of our stuff, so far we haven't really fully caught up to the modern era yet, but that will come with time.
Yeah. And you're in the show's in its second season. And I'm gonna avoid spoilers, but if you start from the beginning, there's like you're introduced to the Witch Queen pretty early
on in season 1. Yes.
And I think that's kind of what hooks you, is just like the way you painted it. So was this something? How did the show, I guess, come about? Like with the inspiration, was this something like you guys had always wanted to do, or did you know what I mean? Like, are you guys
Well, we had wanted to, we had talked for years about working on some sort of creative project together. Hello, Azzy. Oh, my cat. Here he is, big and fluffy. So, we had talked for years about working on some sort of creative project together, and we'd kicked ideas back and forth, but nothing really stuck until Steve had the idea for a story about the region. And on your other podcast, he will tell you this story more in depth. But basically, there were a couple of days when he was traveling back and forth from his home in Asheville back home to Wise County, where we grew up in Virginia, and was just kind of thinking about the history of the area and how basically every time, there's been so much promise, like so many things that were supposed to be, okay, this is the next big thing, and this area is just going to blow up.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be more jobs, there's going to be money, there's going to be all this stuff. And it seems like every time something happens and it just never works out. And he, got to thinking, well, what if there was a reason for that? And that was sort of the seed of where Old Gods of Appalachia came from. And he wrote us an initial script, and our original idea was, well, hey, we're going to write these stories that are fictionalized and spooky, and there are actually monsters to blame, but they're based on actual various historical disasters, like mining disasters and things like that. Like
Mm-hmm.
in season 1, that is actually based on an actual mining disaster. Some of the details, such as bringing in scab workers when there was a strike who happened to be Black, and the way they were treated when there was a mine disaster that actually happened. Of course, they didn't, become sort of fire zombies and come back from the dead, as far as we know. But so yeah, that's where it kind of started. And the idea was, I was going to write an episode, and some of our other friends were going to write different episodes, and we're all kind of going to base it around this theme of, various disasters caused by these things sleeping under the earth. And like one by one, sort of life things came up, and people had to kind of drop out of the project. I had life things and had sort of, fallen off the map for a bit. So Steve kind of continued on with his one story, which was going to be kind of originally, sort of a 3-episode one-shot deal. And so he sends me episode 1 to listen to. And it's several versions of it, as he was playing with sound effects and things like that. And so we got to talking, and I think I'm ready to jump back in now. And he's like, why, honey, I don't think there's anything for you to do now, because I've mostly got it written. And I was just like, well, give me the church. And he's like, what church? He's like, that's to him, sure, this town has, a general store and a church, but those are just set dressing. And I'm like, well, they had to take the body somewhere. Mm-hmm. Where would everybody go for information? Where would they gather in the wake of this disaster? They'd all just go to the church. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of where it started rolling. And I came up with the idea for the character of Cletus. And, we just sort of went from there. And it became it quickly became a lot more episodes than we ever thought it would be. As tends to happen, season 2 is already at least 3 episodes longer than we originally planned.
Well, I think if you have a something like that, it kind of takes on its own life, and the story kind of, not that you guys are
organically,
yeah, it's not like you're not doing the work, but it kind of it's like it takes on that life, and you're like, there's more to this. It can get deeper. There's more to hear. What about this? And so,
yeah,
I mean, you have not just the seasons, but you have a very detailed storyline in your Patreon, couple of them. You guys have live readings on Discord, I believe.
We do. And some of those are public, and some of those are Patreon exclusives. Last year, in the summer, after the close of season 1 and kind of in the midst of working on Build Mama a Coffin, our first, long form Patreon exclusive series, we knew there for various reasons, it was taking a while for us to get to, come off hiatus and come back to season 2. We're like, well, let's do something to tide everyone over. And so we did the Wolf Sisters, which was actually, that one was not Patreon exclusive. It was public. And then, of course, we published it to our main feed after, we did the live reads. So that, that's one that we did. And then recently we did, back in September, we introduced a series of new Patreon exclusive rewards that involve, some Discord exclusive content, Discord exclusive live events and things like that. And the first of those was written by me. It's The Door Under the Floor, which we did in the fall, early winter, like through December 2020. So that one was a lot of fun. That was our first foray into the modern era, because that one actually takes place in the 90s rather than the early 1900s.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is, it's like you kind of mentioned before, I like the storytelling plays off of actual events. So even though it's fiction, it still brings like that awareness, I think. And I don't know. I've just seen such a surgence in like Appalachia as a whole, whether it's especially in the pagan and witchcraft community. You've got the books that have been coming out about like the magic in this region.
Yes.
And it's like it and
like
then you
Backwoods Witchcraft by friend of the show, Jake Richards.
Yes, he was who I was thinking of, because when I remember that book, I was like, oh my gosh, I need to get this.
It's really good.
Yeah, and so if you haven't checked that out, you should. I need to have him on.
You definitely do. I absolutely tell him that I recommended you.
Well, and that's, I think when you see, and there's so many artists that we follow, and I know we have, with algorithms and shit like this, you kind of get into a, not a bubble per se, but I mean, just some amazing artists.
Realize what a small world it is very quickly.
And then I think you guys kind of, from our standpoint as fans, like seem to have taken off. Like it's like it hit the ground running and people just loved it. And of course, that's the amazing storytelling that happens in the show and the atmosphere it builds. But
we really never expected this at all. We were like,
my next question was, did you just do it and think, oh, this is going to be something to like get this out, or did it just
we thought this will be a fun thing to do, and like, maybe after, a year or so, we could even be up to $500 a month and afford, to upgrade our mics or something, maybe. Like, we really did not anticipate that the show and our Patreon would take off the way it has, and we would actually be able to support ourselves doing the podcast. And thankfully, bless our fans for making that possible. Particularly, 2020 was such a disaster with COVID and everything. And I lost my job at the time. And of course, Steve and his wife were teaching. And I can't tell you how grateful I am to everyone, to all our supporters that, they didn't, because of the show and their support, my friends did not have to go back into what I consider a very dangerous environment. So that's been great. It's been amazing.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the other thing is like, it started before all this hit, but not very long, because this show was very new when we started seeing you guys like announce like this was coming. And of course, the whole theme and the feel of it was like, oh, and then it was just, you had the substance to back it up. And so it's nice to see, and it's just such a weird time, but
Yeah.
um, to be able, because like you guys say in the show, like you helped support people out of work, and um in this area it's a rough time as well, because like
Yeah.
it's the area, like I said, we're more, the south, like eastern side of it.
Yeah.
uh, we're not, I mean, Appalachia is a very large and
It's a
long,
large
yeah.
geographic region.
But yeah, down here too, it's, I feel like you have little pockets in Appalachia too,
Yeah.
regional and stuff. But here it's hard because you're working with a population that is, I guess you would say red. There's a lot of the red
There's a
state,
lot.
and
There's a
there's a
lot.
lot of misinformation. So I know that you know
Yeah.
these regions have been devastated like everybody else with COVID, but it's been hard because it's that issue
Yeah.
with the region of like there's so much neglect. And there, you talk about, when you talk about the coal industry and stuff like that, like
Yeah.
there's so much exploitation that goes on here, and
Yeah.
it still goes on here. And it's a hard time. I mean, I'm in healthcare, so
Oh God, I'm sorry.
me too.
Bless you for,
So
working to
I
take
was
care of
never,
everybody.
yeah, that was the thing, is like I was never out of work, but it was, I got COVID from work
Oh
in
wow.
beginning of last year, and I was lucky. But I think there's more with the vaccine, and unfortunately the devastation. I think it's taken more seriously here now than it
It
was
is.
when it first started.
I've definitely seen that here where I live in the Tri-Cities. I've definitely seen the attitudes change, and most people are taking it more seriously than they did for sure.
Yeah, and it's like I said, it's just a region that's just poor for the most part
Yeah.
because of the exploitation, and kind of you get um, when you get up towards Kentucky and stuff like that, with all the coal and stuff. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's still a wonderful region, and again, and I'll keep going back to this. The resurgence in, I think the focus on it is helpful, because at the same time you have the Netflix bullshit come out with the book, Hillbilly Elegy, and it's like,
Yeah.
and I know there's people that are like, well, I don't understand, blah blah blah, and it's
I don't
like,
understand why this is bad.
right. But it is. And so I think there's a lot more that coming, to the forefront now, that kind of pushes back on that, all the stereotypes, all the
Yeah.
and so like your show, I consider part of that. And not even just including the witchcraft side of things. Like that's a whole other
It's a whole
thing,
other
because it's
thing.
different down here
Yeah.
in these
I mean, we
hollers.
just, yeah, even aside from that, we really just want to portray the people who live in our region with dignity.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a hard one, because it's not typically seen. And I mean, there's sometimes, the more you look at it, I mean, we watched something, and it was hard to watch, and we're like, shit, because there's some stuff that you don't even realize that
Yeah.
is like this portrayal of a caricature, even if it's like the tiniest little thing, and you're like, shit, yeah, fuck that,
Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah. That's bullshit.
right. And I just I'm part of a little friend group with my other podcast as well, of paranormal investigators, and
Oh, cool. Fun.
we have a little chat group, and one of them's from Washington, the other one's from Ohio, and they started talking, and they're like, yeah, I'm really interested in like this Appalachian like folklore and witchcraft, and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm recommending you, and I'm saying like, oh yeah, and so it's funny to see somebody from the Pacific Northwest interested in what happens here. But
It
that's the other
is.
thing as I wanted to get into was what your practice looks like, or what kind of led you to this path. And because I think there is a different lens and a different style of witchery when you come from here, the Bible Belt kind of mountain.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to break everyone's heart because what I practice is not really traditional. Appalachian witchcraft. But I definitely, um, you know, I've been, I'm reading Jake's book, Backwoods Witchcraft, and kind of looking at some of those practices. And I'm close friends, with so a couple of the folks involved with Geode, which is a local group based in Johnson City, which has worked to create a, what is my computer doing? Sorry.
You're fine.
Okay. Who've worked to actually create their own tradition that is actually based in Appalachia, on, and rooted in the land and the land spirits here, and not just kind of a throwback to European traditions.
Yes.
Yeah, so my friends, Allison Mullins, who's also one of our voice actors, and my friend Ian are involved in that. So I know some of those folks over there, and they've been a really great resource, for checking when we need it for the podcast and things like that. Personally, I I practice. I'm pretty eclectic. Um, One of the things that I'm involved in a Hecatean tradition, which is not actually like trying to do Greek Reconstructionist work.
Oh my God.
It's
Yes.
actually sort of a new revelation. Jason Miller's Sorcery of Hecate. If you've heard of that,
Yes.
that
Well,
is what.
I'm Hecatean as well.
Oh,
And
cool.
so, yeah, I've read his stuff. Cindy Brandon's been on the show. I love her stuff too.
Oh, awesome.
But I know what you mean when you're saying, like, it's not a Reconstructionist kind of
Yeah.
work with Hecate. That's interesting because she does seem to have like a presence in
A
Appalachia as
presence,
well.
yeah. And so, yeah, I work with Hecate. And, I make my little devotions to Bastet just because, I'm a cat mom, and I've always just felt called to cats and to her. So I do that. And that's just sort of like, that's not really much of a practice other than, hey, I'm going to make some offerings. Please watch over my kitties.
Yeah.
I do some ancestor work, honoring, my family basically. So I do some of that, and that is actually, something that we tend to do here. That is more of a traditional Appalachian kind of practice.
Yeah.
What else? And and all of this kind of, a lot of this kind of works together. For
Okay.
I use Hecate for my work with Hecate, launching sigils, because I'm way into sigil magic. I absolutely love it. So I also have my feet in some chaos magic as well.
Nice.
But I tend to actually, because she's a goddess of the crossroads, I use her for a lot of road opening, when I'm launching sigils.
I mean, that's so in North Carolina, there's a place called Statesville, which I know you're a neighbor, and Steve is a
Mhm.
closer neighbor, but to this area. But yeah, there's like and I'm gonna fuck it up, but it's a train, either museum station, thing, and they did a mural, and the artist painted like this huge mural of Hecate at the
Oh,
middle of a
neat. I have to
crossroad.
go see that now.
Um, I've not yet been to see it. I think it's like an hour for me, but at the same time, it like caused an uproar, and it's like, oh my gosh, do you know this is like the goddess of witchcraft, and we can't be having that. So that's
Like,
kind of,
yeah.
yeah.
Yes and no, and yes, we can.
But like, so to me, what's weird about the region is I don't practice what you would call traditional either,
Yeah.
Appalachian magic. I do not, and while I understand it, I see it, and I know it's there, and I know its purpose, and I know its workings. I don't personally work with any Bible verses or anything like that. That's just
Yeah, I
not.
don't either.
And part of that is because I've had a bad experience with it, and I think you do have that that feeling in this area where if you've either been like completely put off, and by that idea, or
Yeah.
you're using it as a tool. And so I don't think that there's anything wrong with it. I've used I got an oil from um, Corey of New World Witchery, and he, he works with the Psalms a lot, and it has one in there. And I mean, damned if that shit didn't work. I mean, it
It
works.
worked.
It's just
Yeah,
it's
it
my
worked.
practice. And every now and then I'm like, I wonder, because I grew up, I know the shit. Like I wonder, but yeah, that's what I've talked about before on the podcast. Is this area, your family may have been Christian,
Yeah.
but they're working magic. They would never call it witchcraft.
They would never,
Ever.
yeah, they wouldn't have
No.
called it that
You
at
get
all.
slapped in the face if you said, "Grandma, you practicing witchcraft." But
Yeah,
yeah,
but that's what
but
you're
you
doing.
kind of are. And so I think that this region has, and it's kind of always been isolated. I think one of the favorite lines that I think the Old God starts with is kind of like, it gets darker here earlier than anywhere else, and the sun dips behind the hills, and
Yeah.
it's a different place. And there's so, like, when you go to Western North Carolina, um, even from here, it's a short drive, but you feel a change, you feel a difference,
Mhm.
um, and you see it and feel it. And like, I feel Hecate out there, and I know that sounds weird to be like, how do you find Hecate in the mountains of North Carolina, when she's pre-Greek / Greek and Mediterranean in that area? And it's like, because that's so
She's
limiting.
everywhere,
Yeah. And
and a friend and mentor Jason, found her in the Pine Barrens of Jersey. I mean,
right.
that's just,
Yeah, I need to get a hold of Jason and get him on,
you should
because
definitely have him on the show
yeah, he
for
was one
sure.
of the first, and I've even got one of his like Hecate sigils I've got on the altar that I've drawn,
Yeah,
like a
I've actually
protection.
got, let me see. I don't know if you can see how well you can see it, but I have this one
Oh
that
yeah, yeah,
this is one of if you can see it there, that's I think he was involved with the design of this, but this is actually one of Aiden Walker's pieces.
yeah. I was gonna say I love his work, and he
Oh
has some
God,
really
I do
nice
too.
Hecate stuff, and yeah,
Yeah.
that's it's the podcast, all these episodes always end up talking about Hecate, but because it's just she's involved. But for me, the barred owl is like such a symbol, and that's
Yeah.
as far as like mountain magic. And I don't do anything that I would call granny magic, although there's a difference, because like somebody like Tamara, who is the other host on Hex-Files, she, her family's from here. My family is not from here. My family's from California.
Oh,
And
okay.
so even though I was born and grew up here, I don't have the same kind of like lore and practices that you would say, well, my grandma always did this kind of floor wash. She always did this. So I don't have that. So maybe I would be more, practicing ancestral stuff that way if I did.
Yeah.
But I don't. The closest is my grandmother was born in Ohio, but I don't know if that is part of it. But like I said, she grew up mostly on the West Coast. So
Yeah. Yeah, my
where
family, um, as far as I recall, didn't really practice much of anything. But so I really kind of heard about these practices secondhand.
right.
My let's see, my grandmother had converted to Catholicism. We still don't really know why she just decided to do that. So so I grew up kind of sort of Catholic, but not really, because at a certain point my mom took a dislike to the priest, the new priest at the church, so we stopped going.
I mean, that sounds like. I mean, that happens here.
I
You
mean,
know.
yeah, well, I mean, yeah, the priest who baptized me, who she really loved, they moved him on to another parish, and the new guy shows up driving like a sports car.
Oh my
I think it was
God.
like a red Camaro or some shit, and my mom was just like, I just don't think that's very priestly.
Yes.
That was the end of that.
I mean, that's the shit, because I grew up going to like a little backwoods, like the preacher was like 90, 100 years old, and just fucking like when he eventually like retired at some point, like people were like, I don't know about this new feller. Um,
Right.
because it's like, but it was also, the hellfire damnation
One of those. Yeah.
bullshit. Right. So, but yeah, I think um there's a lot of things that when you have books like Backwoods Witchcraft and you start to see like, okay, we're calling stuff witchcraft now, but this is not European. This is its
No.
own, creation. And
Yeah, like it certainly may have its roots in those original practices,
right,
but when centuries now ago, when our ancestors moved over here, we had to like find new herbs and roots, and there are different trees and things, and like things
yeah,
changed, things evolved over the years, and they became their own practices.
yeah, it's kind of like, I mean, obviously it's gonna be European, if it wasn't native to here.
Yeah.
Um, and
And I say, I'm saying our ancestors because, you and I are white.
yeah.
And that's why I was referencing European. And I, will
Oh
not
yes,
step out of my lane and comment on those practices that are indigenous to other cultures.
right. And I think, that's the other thing with the rise of social media and like the different, I guess, witchcraft practices is like right now, the big thing is the, appropriation and stuff of other things, because for so
Yeah.
long you had, I always think of it, and maybe that's my personal experience, but it's always been the 90s, and I mean, of course I was 85, but like the 90s and the early 2000s idea of like new age. It was like it's all the same, like Wicca is the same, this is the only witchcraft to practice, and that was what people knew, and that's what people
Yeah.
thought of. So I think this like coming back to using like what's around you, I think that was the second episode of this podcast, is like how to use stuff around you, where we started talking about kudzu and how to use that as like a
Yeah.
prosperity thing. And it's one of those things where I think people are getting away from, oh, I have to have this type of wood or this type of plant that only grows in Europe, and it's like, no, use
No, work with what's around you.
right. And Hecate is not, it's not like I'm going to read her correspondences and see a barred owl, but for me, that's how she showed up to me. That's how she's always appeared. And of course, that is because I say they're prevalent here. I've never seen them before I started working with her in the wild or heard them, but
Yeah.
then they are. And that doesn't mean that somebody else that works with her is going to see a barred owl. Obviously, that's a little bit personal, but
Yeah.
you know, that's why I like the visual. And my last episode I had talked about I had a friend on who is Luciferian, and I talked about how my idea of the devil, like the best way I could describe it was talking about old gods, was like this stag, like, because I've always seen the devil as a very like nature centric like
Figure. Yeah.
aspect. And that could be just the way things go in the hills, but yeah, like just that visual is kind of like nature unchecked, like the chaos and like the wildness, but also the beauty of nature. Like that's how I see the devil per se. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I think, when you see deer and stuff here, and they pop up in weird times, which they have for me too, your witchcraft is born of that area, and you stop thinking, I need to see this like fucking animal or tree that's not
Right.
native here. I'm gonna, the spirits here are gonna work with you.
Exactly. You got to get to know your local spirits.
Right. And I mean, there's a long history. I can't quit laughing about the Appalachian meme that everybody was like, Steve was like, yes, we've been tagged in it. We've seen it.
Uh-huh. Yes.
Um,
People have also like messaged it to us who may not be in the group, and whom we're just like, yes, thank you. We have in fact seen this many
yeah.
times.
Um, but it's something like
Like
that.
seriously, there was one day when that one first started going around when Heather and I both had axed like 20 of them each. It was so ridiculous. We're like, please stop. Yes, this has been posted. Stop, stop, stop.
But I think yeah, something like that it's one of those things where I saw it on the Old Gods Facebook page, which I'm a part of, and other ones, and then it started popping up on TikTok and Instagram.
Yeah.
It's like, but I do think that there's this draw and this interest.
Yeah.
Of course, it's a long way from reflecting, because it's just there's a lot of brainwashing here too, with when you talk about the politics of the area
Yeah.
and all that. But hopefully, shows like yours and things like that will help bring the beauty of this region, and not just they're real poor out there.
Right.
And I mean, you drive through some of these backwoods, and I mean, it's so like some of these places are just, you can't even like describe how poor it looks. Like it looks abandoned, but it's not.
But it's not.
And yeah. And so that's the other thing too. It's like, it's not the poverty porn, but it's also like, yes, you should be focused on the beauty and all this too, but realize that, the region needs that kind of exposure. And
Yeah. And we, there's definitely poverty, but there's also, at times you'll, and Steve's talked about this, we've particularly in, Southwest Virginia, where we grew up, like on the edge of Kentucky and in Eastern Kentucky,
mhm.
you'll be driving through, the mountains, and they're very beautiful. And oh, look, here's a big old house. Isn't
Oh
that nice?
yes.
And go around a curve, and suddenly here's a strip mine, and it's desolate.
Yes.
It's just the stark contrasts that you run into are kind of crazy. And I
Right.
mean, I guess that's true of any place, but yeah, it's
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not like this is a problem that's only isolated to the region, but
no,
so,
but
as far as the region's history of how it's viewed and how it's portrayed was on purpose.
yeah,
They
it's
didn't
people act like
accidentally.
that's all that's here is just,
Yeah.
is
And
poverty and desolation, and that's not true. It's a much, richer area, and yes, we have those problems, and we need to solve those for sure.
I think yeah, part of that too was, it was intentional, because it's like, well, if we don't show value here, then we can like
Yeah,
clear out the mountains from underneath their feet, and make
yeah,
them just like so desperate for what we can save them from. And it's like, this region never needed saving from themselves, but that's like,
right, exactly.
but
Um, and Steve and I have talked about that, because there was a time when the people, churches would send missionaries here,
yes.
like like Jesus ain't what we're lacking, y'all.
Right. Yeah.
Oh
But yeah, and I think that's the other thing, is like this area is so like, the people here are very self-sufficient.
yeah,
And, I think that's where the magic like feels different. And like when I try to explain, like, using your intuition and using that, and that might be a regional thing too, in the sense of, you know, in the beginning when I started the path, I was like, I need to read these books. This like I can't do a spell unless I Google this. And like the
yeah,
more you're doing it, the more you're like, I got
yeah.
this. And listeners
Like
will
the more you get into it, the more you're like, eh,
right.
I've got a candle and some leaves from outside and these rocks. That'll be fine.
Yeah. And I found
You
these
really learn very quickly. I can make do with what I've got around me, and it'll be fine.
yeah. And and that's not saying again that that's local to this region, but I think that
Yeah, yeah,
mentality is the same here. Is like when you look at the magic from the region, and like the people, just like the little things they brought from Scotland, and they brought, but it's also the blending of just kind of what was in this area and working with it and the spirit. So I think,
yeah,
I've had listeners, ask me questions about, well, what would you do with this? And it's like, well, I would do this, but you might not live it where you can walk out the door and find bones.
right. Yeah,
But I'm sure there's a place you could drive to hike, and this stuff like shows itself, and it's like I've
Yeah.
always seen it as like gifts from the land and like the spirits, and it's
Yeah.
almost like try to be in harmony with them, and they'll give you little presents, and you'll know when
Yeah.
it's right to take it or to
Or
leave
it's
it
not.
alone
Yeah.
when it feels like it's a trap. But yeah. So did you always intend? I'm trying to remember the questions I had for you. Did you always intend on witchcraft kind of being a theme in Old Gods, or did it just kind of naturally happen, or were you like, Steve, I'm putting this in here?
That just sort of organically happened.
Really?
Yeah, Steve originally wrote the character of the Witch Queen, and then and she kind of has her own thing. Like, she doesn't, a lot of what she does isn't, you don't really see, like, like as much of actual practices reflected, because she's got her little mystical powers and things like that. But as the show goes on, I've been like, you've been more of, okay, well, here, how about you do this and how about you do that, been tried to bring in more of, well, okay, for example, in Build Mama Coffin, we actually delve a lot further into, like, this is an actual granny witch. And so that was where I kind of, had a lot more input there on how she worked and what she might do and things like that. So yeah, I guess we didn't really intend, from the beginning, we did not really intend to have as much witchcraft in the show.
That seems crazy to me because it seems like it's so integral to the story and it's
Yeah.
so entwined.
Yeah, and originally we started out with the story of Sarah Avery and what happened to the town.
Hmm.
The Witch Queen came later, even though we released that episode like before the main storyline that we actually planned. Steve just had the idea and ran with it.
Well, there you
So
go.
that's kind of where that all got started. And I think in the beginning she was going to be more of a almost a fey creature. And then, as time went on, she became the Witch Queen, and we just called her the Witch Queen and things like that. So that's kind of where that came from. It was more of an organic process of, oh, but what if we do this? So
Have you ever thought like, oh my God, what if the old gods are actually like guiding this fucking story?
let's not. No, I mean, maybe, I don't know.
Uh,
Could be.
but no,
But
it's
not like, how we mean old gods as in like monsters. I don't
right.
think.
No, like
Not
yeah,
like, not eldritch monsters hiding under the earth.
right. No, not the Lovecraftian idea of like
Yeah, not the Lovecraftian sort of idea, but more like,
it's the spirit. I
the
feel
old
like
the
it's
old
the spirit of
building.
place that's like, oh, you're talking about us? Okay, well, let's,
Okay,
you know,
well, how about you do this?
yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's how magic works around these parts. It just kind
Yeah,
of is there. It's just already there.
yeah, it's kind of there, and you just have to tap into it. But yeah, I didn't really how I got into it, I guess, which I think we touched on briefly earlier. Um, yeah, I am one of those people who had kind of not great experiences with, organized religion in
Yeah.
in the region. Just, a lot of people, were very seemed really to condemn anyone with different beliefs than
Hmm.
they had. And I encountered a little bit of that, like, because my family was Catholic.
Yeah.
And some people, have opinions about that. But just
Oh,
more than that, like, I would see things like, there was a boy I went to school with that we didn't really even like each other, but other kids in our class were like just bullying him, like verbally, saying, you're going to go to hell and all this, because he said he was an atheist. And I was, you know, one of the few people who was, stood up for him and was like, yeah, this is his right, and I'm like, and my parents, you know, definitely have raised me in a certain way to believe, you know, in like all of it's civil rights and things like that. They were both social workers, so they're, you know, they're kind of woke parents for the 80s.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I just jumped right in there and I was like, no, you know, you can't do this. You can't be like this. You can't judge him. You know, this is America, and he has freedom to believe or not believe in whatever religion he wants, and it's none of your business. And I was like 11 or 12 at the time, like,
I bet
but you know,
I bet their jaws were like hit the floor, like,
oh
what?
yeah, they were, yeah, oh, very much so. And so, yeah, and then of course it was like, well, you too, blah blah blah. You must think that too, and I'm like, it's none of your business what what I believe
Right.
either.
Well,
Um,
if you don't know, it's not just, oh, there's a prejudice and discrimination and like attacks on people that don't believe in Christianity. Like this area, like you used to talk about Catholics, like,
uh-huh.
oh yeah, they will.
Oh, the different denominations will fight.
That's what I'm saying. Even down to like, well, this fucking Methodists over there. I mean,
Mhm.
yeah, it's crazy. So I mean,
Like
they're
those people drink. I saw them going into the liquor store.
yeah.
Like, it's that kind of thing. Yeah, it's very, yeah. It's
No,
just
I remember, yeah, like being around that, and it's like, well, I mean, even the Baptists drink. They're just like, well, I'm just
yeah,
gonna lie about it.
they just pretend not to know each other in the liquor store.
Right. Yeah. That's but it's like, oh, Catholics are, you know, they're drinking and but then it's like the Baptist church I grew up in would still do communion, but it was like Welch's and shit.
Yeah,
And like oyster crackers. I don't know. It was
Welch's and oyster crackers.
yeah. But it's
Oh
like
yeah, I've been to those. I've been to those.
it's
Because
so
you know,
weird.
you grow up here and you spend the night with your friends, and of course you got to go to church with them the next morning.
Oh yeah, I forgot about
So,
that. Where it's like, were they going to church with us? Because let them know we're going to church.
uh-huh.
Uh,
Yep.
but yeah, it was.
Bring something nice to wear.
Yeah, you have to do
Or
that.
not, depending on what kind of church they went to.
Right.
Some of them went to a casual church. Some of them went to a wear nice stuff church. You just never know. Somebody has to tell your mama.
Yeah. um, but it's it's one of those things that it's like, I don't know. It's hard to um explain how they can be so anti but I mean, I guess organized religion in a whole has magic throughout it.
Yeah,
Christianity, you know,
they
all
don't
of
call
them,
it that, but
they don't call them that, yeah. But it's weird because like it to be like, well, and Tamara was just talking about how somebody had told her something about this, and this, and it's like they were talking about it so matter of fact, and it's like, well, what if I told you that was witchcraft? They would have like shit themselves. They'd have been like, what? But it's like, I mean, I have family that, you know, they're like, yeah, we know he's a witch, blah blah. They're probably like, I hate it for him. He's going to hell. But they don't actually say it out loud. But at the
yeah,
same
they
time,
don't
they'll
say.
be like,
They're at
can
least polite enough not to say it to your face.
yeah, but they'll be the first ones to be like, "What do I need to do? I think there's like a spirit in my house,"
Right?
and they're okay with you coming in and doing this stuff.
Oh yeah.
And I
You get rid of that
remember,
ghost for them. They're
yeah,
more than happy to talk to you.
right. It's like, wait, did you ask Jesus first if this was cool? Um, but yeah, it's definitely a different. It's one of those where the witchcraft here and the magic here can definitely have the Bible intertwined into it.
Oh yeah. And like you mentioned before, like I know lots of people who aren't particularly religious, but they work with saints and things like that because they're like, they're spirits and it works.
Right. I mean, sometimes you get to the point where it's like, if it works, it works.
Right. Yeah. If it works, it works.
So you're in, and I don't have to, I can edit it out, but you're Tennessee, yeah?
Yeah, I live in Bristol, so I'm like an hour and a half from Asheville.
Okay. And we're like we're further now than we were, but we're not that far from Asheville. Now, have you guys thought? Now I know COVID changed a lot, but you guys were going to do a live show, right,
We
or a live
were.
reading in and around there because it was like, oh fuck yeah, and
We
I
had a live show planned and some con appearances. Like, yeah, it was kind of we were gonna do some stuff like that last year, and then
and
and
then
COVID happened. Like, and actually, it's really funny. We were talking to a production company in LA, which was part of what delayed season 2 significantly, is like our talks with them, which eventually we decided not to sign with them, but we were talking to a production company in LA, and like the week before lockdown started, like they flew us out to LA, and when we were coming home on the plane, this Steve likes the aisle seat and I like the window seat. So there was this young woman seated between us, and she was sniveling and coughing and like
oh Lord.
rubbing, like wiping her nose on her sleeves and stuff. And we're both like, ew. And Steve very discreetly asked the flight attendant if we might move because there were extra seats. And
Well,
yeah, like as
yeah,
soon as we got to cruising altitude, we were like up and gone.
right. It
Like, no,
sounds
thank you.
right. It sounds like just like the typical like pandemic / like zombie movie. Like that's how it starts. Is you're on the plane
It
and you're like,
was
wait,
so
is something happening that
zombie
we don't know about?
movie pandemic. It was, yeah. And it wasn't COVID. It was just a cold because I did catch it.
Yeah.
I was sick when I got home, but no, it was just a regular garden variety cold. Thank goodness. Uh,
Yeah, I
at
think
least
that's
as
one of
far
the
as I know, it was just, regular garden variety cold. Did not have any loss of, sense of taste or smell or any like shortness of breath or other like, real extreme symptoms. It was
right.
just cold. So thank
Yeah.
goodness.
Yeah, those things still exist.
They do, and you catch them.
Which is funny because we just had Nightgeist on the other podcast, but one of the hosts was, and they're out in California, and one of the hosts was like, "Oh, I've got a sinus infection. It's definitely not COVID, but what do I
Yeah.
need to do? Does anybody have suggestions?" And I'm like, whiskey, like hot tea and whiskey
Hot
or
tea,
bourbon.
whiskey. Yeah.
And then she's like, "A lot of people are saying that," and I was like, "Well, that's how you do it down here."
That's how you do it. That's how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I've had my annual sinus infection. I think I've had 2 actually.
So I know I'm planning, we're going to have in like next week, we're going to have you and Steve on for Hex-Files, and we'll get
Yes.
into more probably like
More show stuff.
huh?
More show stuff.
Yes. And the critters and the creatures and lore and stuff and inspirations.
Yeah.
But so there'll probably be some recurring conversations. But so if COVID does get better, and it lessens, and hopefully with all the vaccines and all that shit, but what is that something that you
The live
guys
shows,
are wanting to do?
yes, absolutely. And we actually got a contact recently from a patron on Patreon who has a little venue outside Knoxville in Maryville, which I think they pronounce Maryville, but anyway, Maryville, who was asking if we might want to do something there. And I was like, absolutely. Once it's safe to do so, we'd love to talk with you about that. I did before COVID. I spent a lot more time than I have this past year in Knoxville. Hanging out there. It's a great little town. It's got a lot of awesome breweries like Asheville, but it's less of a tourist town. It's got a lot of different industries. It's a cool little city. I'm really fond of it. So I'm like, absolutely, I'd be
Right.
happy to do that. So yeah, we're definitely looking to pick up the live shows again once we can.
Yeah, and some of the cons and stuff would be
That
a
would be
cool
awesome
experience.
too.
And like I said, we can also get more into it there. But the one thing that brought up talking about witchcraft and like how it's perceived, I like looking at your pages and like everything else with you guys. I didn't expect with such like, I mean, people like horror, but I thought they would be more like, well, y'all shouldn't be talking about that. And I don't know if you guys ever get any of that, but I mean, it seems like people are just like, oh, we love the Witch Queen. And
We haven't got a lot of that.
uh-huh.
We have gotten some. We had this guy who I think is a pastor somewhere. He's looking at his profile and everything. He seems like kind of very transphobic and maybe racist, and so we really don't care much what he thought.
Right.
But we did have this guy who was like bashing us on Twitter and who left a review that was a 1-star review that said basically the writing and production of this show are so great. It's a shame they hate Christians so much.
Right. Like you've ever really
Which
said
we
anything about.
don't.
Right.
Like, and we were, my comment was, well, because I'm assuming he was talking about either Cletus or the well-meaning Christian folks who kind of take daughter Dooley off into the woods and kind of throw her out of their group. And my comment was, well, brother, if you see yourself in those Christians, maybe you need to pray on that.
I mean, that's, yeah, bless his heart. Like I mean,
like, bless his heart. Like,
right.
No, like we absolutely don't have, no, I don't think our show is anti-Christian at all. And I think, in fact, like part of the story of Cletus in season 1 is, he was tempted.
Yeah. Well, that's the other thing too, is, I mean, it's not just that specific group. It's everybody has those types of people. But like you said,
Yeah.
if you're seeing this character and relating, then maybe there's
relating, then maybe, yeah, you need to think on that a little bit.
Like, love the production, love the story, love it all. I'm sorry, y'all are going to go to hell. 2 stars.
Right. That's it. That's basically it. And it's just like, right. No. But yeah, it's like, no, it's like, nah. Yeah, then my thought was, Cletus was tempted and his flock basically fell prey to a false prophet, which scripture warns you against. So I think maybe you need to rethink.
I don't understand
that, that our show is anti-Christian, which is like was his claim. It's like, no, it's not.
Right. Yeah. It's just, it's going to be, and especially when you get popular and I mean, you're obviously critics, but
you can't, you're, no art is for everybody.
Of course.
And that's fine, I mean,
Yeah, I think when you're getting those reviews, you're doing something right. But yeah, and it's like, it's the same thing where you hear reviews. It's like, I wish they would, kind of keep politics, or they do this, and it's like, that kind of bullshit. Obviously, you guys don't talk about that on the podcast because you're telling a story. You're not like us, where we're just like shooting the shit and talking about things.
Yeah,
like,
right. Yeah,
it's like, I mean, if
and it's in in the group, in the way that we mod our Facebook group, and
right,
the kinds of behavior and language that we do and do not tolerate, for example.
Yeah. And I love how you like, I don't know, I'm sure it's between you and Steve and the other ones, but I like how you shut down shit over there, especially when it's like, in regards to, say, like the Hillbilly Elegy, it's like, do not post nothing about
post about this. Do not give them press at all.
Yes.
Do not give them space in your life.
So what's, I guess what's coming up next? Season 2, go listen. Yeah. If you've never listened to Old Gods, then you need to start, and make sure you start at the very, very, very,
very beginning, episode 0.
Right, because most of the time you'll skip those because you think, oh, this is just like a trailer, or this is...
No, that's not a trailer. The ones that are trailers are we say they are trailers.
Yeah, you guys are very good about that. And, you get a lot of confusion of like, well, is this a side story? Is this the new season? I remember that with like, the Wolf Sisters, which was a great story as well. Yeah.
And we
So
really try to I'm like setting up the episodes, uploading them to our podcast host. I always try to, if it starts with episode whatever number, that's regular season, and otherwise it'll start with whatever special
yeah.
side story it is. It'll start with the name of it, and then it'll say like chapter 1 or whatever.
Yeah. Well, again, I really appreciate you coming on.
I appreciate you
I
having
did.
me. It's been fun.
Yeah, I reached out to the account, and like I never know if it was you or Steve at any given time, but I was like, yeah, if you ever want to come on, and it was like, yeah, just name whenever, because you guys were like one of our early
Yeah.
supporters, and it's just weird to me that it's like, and I mean appreciate it because it's cool that you guys
Yeah,
are
you
like,
were one of the earliest podcasts that like mentioned us to your audience. So
yeah, we're like, oh my god, what if we recommend it and it's
definitely
not good?
remember you.
No. It seems like you're very in tune with you're not just doing it for the sake of doing it. You can tell that you guys love it, that it's an art, and that you love, I mean, you guys are just great storytellers.
Oh,
And
thank you.
I think it shows in how you interact with your fans and listeners. And, so yeah, it's a great community on the Facebook group. If you listen and you don't follow over there, go over there. It's fun. I'm not personally on the Discord, but I should probably join that.
Yes,
I'm just not a big
hop on the
Discord.
Discord.
I'm not a big
Yeah,
Discord user.
I have actually I've used Discord a little bit,
Uh-huh.
but I started to use it more because of because of the podcast. And not just our podcast, but like other podcasts that I follow. So
Yeah, we have one, and I'd never known anything about it before then. And so I try, sometimes I forget to check it, and I'm like, oh shit.
you're like,
And
oh no, I haven't talked to these people in a week.
right. And so it's like trying to juggle all that. But
Yeah.
so without any spoilers, like what's to come? Surely another season.
Yes. Let's see what's to come. All right. So right now we're in Act 2 of season 2. We've got another couple episodes that are part of Act 2. And let me point out that Act 2 was supposed to be 2 episodes. So anyway, so we're in Act 2, and that'll wrap up with tomorrow. So we'll have tomorrow's episode, and then another couple weeks, what should be the final episode of Act 2. Then we have Act 3, which will mark the end of season 2. I think we've only got 3, but it's lengthy, and we're probably going to end up being like end of May when the season wraps up. We are planning another longer Patreon exclusive to follow Build Mama a Coffin. So that's also coming down the pike for probably this summer.
Nice.
So, and we're planning some more right now, some more live Discord events. So all of that is coming up, and we're working on and we're also working on our tabletop RPG. We're in the planning stages of that, but that's also going to be coming relatively soon.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, another meeting about that this evening or tomorrow evening. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've been low key like wondering like what's next. Obviously podcast, but I'm
Yeah.
like, you guys are, in it. Like what's
Yeah.
next, So and I think you would be perfect for the con. So hopefully when this all
Yeah.
goes, you guys can really get out there and
Yeah, that would be great.
and do the Dark Lord's work.
Exactly. So yeah, that's kind of what's next right now. We're definitely open to, I think this is like the first game. We're definitely open to doing others. And other sorts of media too. So we'll see what happens, but we're open to lots of things, and kind of just seeing where it goes right now.
Again, I can't wait to talk to you again next week.
And again next week, yeah.
But no, it was a lot of fun.
It
And
was.
like I said, just go follow Old Gods of Appalachia. It's not Appalachia.
Appalachia.
Yeah. You can't follow if you can't say it like that.
Exactly. Yeah, right.
But go follow them, go listen. The episodes are short, but they're too short because then you're like, fuck, what's happening? But it's the perfect binge podcast.
Everybody, yeah, we really have we had some early feedback that people really liked, like the 25 to 30-minute length.
Mm-hmm.
And so we kind of think that's really the sweet spot. We've had some longer episodes, but it's such an easy little bite to listen to an episode when you're cooking dinner or doing some housework or something like that, and it's not one that's going to eat up an hour and a half that maybe you don't have time to listen to all at once.
Right.
So
yeah, and I mean,
that's one of the reasons that our episodes are short.
And they're easy enough to go back to because I've done it before. Is like when the next act starts, I'm like, okay, let me just make sure I'm not missing anybody.
Yeah, let me get back. Let me refresh my memory.
Yeah, you can re-listen to it pretty quick. We know you all sit through hours of Netflix, so you can do it. I promise.
Yeah.
But no, it's a great show. So follow them. You guys are on all the social medias.
Yep. You can, we're Old Gods of Appalachia.com, patreon.com/Old Gods of Appalachia. And yeah, follow us on the socials. We're Old Gods of Appalachia on Instagram and Facebook, and Old Gods Pod on Twitter and Tumblr.
Nice. Well,
and yeah, you can get the link to the Discord also from our website.
Yeah, because I think those are like info. I don't know. I'm not a Discord person. Again.
Yeah. You need a link. So it's like, yeah, just go to the website. It's linked.
But it's not just a podcast. It's so much in depth. So go follow them. Go check out their Patreon because it's like I said, those side stories are worth it. And I remember you guys started that and we're like, this tier gets shirts and all that. And like I remember seeing it sell out and like, those tiers fill up, and it was like, damn, y'all had something, and it's such a good story.
Everybody loves shirts, but we had to stop doing shirts because Patreon makes it really difficult to collect sizes.
Right. And I'm like, eventually when there's merch, I'm like, I'm just going to do like a third-party store because trying to add those to Patreon seems like confusing.
Do discounts.
Discounts. That's the way to go now. I think most people are heading that way, but I'm so excited to see what's to come. I'm excited to talk to you both next week. And if you're listening to this, then that means it's already been out because Hex-Files drops first. So go backwards, and listen to that one, listen to this one, and then go binge Old Gods if you haven't already.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Until next week when I talk to you on my other podcast. It was a lot of fun. I'll have to have you back and get more into whatever, witchcraft. Yeah. And I'll need to reach out to Jason Miller and Jake Richards. I'll be like, so
absolutely. Reach out to them both. And
I know your mom and them.
They'd be
All right. And to everybody else, goodbye.